crazy. She writes about a Shetland Island PI. They're just wonderful books. And then the last, I'm going to include another new person, a guy that I am just so, I was just so impressed with. His name is Sean Cherkover. He's a Chicago writer, and his first book, Big City Bad Blood, is a quintessential PI novel. I could never write something like that. I admire it enormously, and I think he's going to be a writer to watch.
Fascinating, just fascinating. If this doesn't generate some controversy, I don't know what will. Talk about an idiosyncratic group. We've talked about 15 mystery authors we feel that you all should read. But there's a lot more to say about these folks and a lot of others. So who's on your list? We'll be back in just a minute with our guest bookstore owner, Gary Schultz. Meanwhile, here's some topics that we're going to be covering in future programs. Take a look while we change some things around. Independent mystery bookstores are the lifeblood of the crime fiction community. One of the best happens to be right here in our area in Minneapolis. We're very pleased to have one of the owners of Once Upon a Crime as our guest. You're going to start the interview. What are you going to ask him?
I am. First thing I want to say is Gary is not only our good friend, he is a good friend to all mystery writers and, most importantly, mystery readers everywhere.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. You are co-owner along with Pat Frovarb of Once Upon a Crime, which you introduced as one of the premier mystery bookstores in the Twin Cities. I think it's one of the premier mystery bookstores in the country.
Absolutely.
And I've seen a lot of them.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've been involved with the store now for several years, and you know a heck of a lot about this business. The sad truth about today's market is that the large chains have made it very difficult for the smaller independent stores to succeed. But I'm happy to report that Once Upon a Crime is alive and doing very well. And at some point, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about why the success of Once Upon a Crime. We have our ideas, but you're an insider. Yeah. Okay. But what I'd like to do, first of all, is have you talk to us a little bit about where your interest in crime fiction comes from, and was that what led you to Once Upon a Crime?
Well, it was a long road. I've always been a reader, and I've gone in and out of different genres. I read straight through all the Sherlock Holmes when I was like 15. My brother introduced me to James Bond, and I went, "Oh boy!" You know. And then I got away, went more into science fiction, kind of by way of Kurt Vonnegut, and just loved his stuff.
Yeah.
And then I started nonfiction a lot while I was in school, and then in my professional work before doing this. And I found myself in Minnesota, and that's a long story. Okay, bam, I'm in Minnesota. And in need of a hobby. And I think I saw a thing in the paper about the Twin Cities Book Fair, and said, that's it, I'll collect books. And I started out with horror. I was a big horror fan. And Peter Straub was probably my favorite writer. I mean, what a way with words. And Peter, I think he's been done an injustice in his marketing, because they keep referring to him as a horror, but he changed to a mystery writer.
That's right.
Straight mystery. The Blue Rose trilogy is just phenomenal.
We talk a lot about the publishing business and the mistakes they make.
So he led me into mysteries. And just make this short, owning a bookstore has been a wild fantasy of mine since I was a teenager. And I lived out in New England at the time, and I thought, oh, great, just have a bookstore in Vermont, it'd be perfect.
Yeah.
And, you know, it took me, 35 years before it's...
And it's not in Vermont.
You got the
45
cold
years.
part of it, right?
Yeah.
45 years, oh no, to finally realize that.
Obviously, you've seen this business for a long time now. Care to talk about trends that that you see in the crime genre these days?
Well, a big trend I see we have to get used to is everything's coming out in trade paperback, and it's going to take over. It worries me about the collecting market. How
Is that a
how
big
it's going
part
to
of your,
reflect that.
of your sales?
It's becoming.
We're talking original trades as opposed to
Original
the
trades.
hardcovers now.
I'm afraid, who knows how long it'll take. Listening to RD talk, he credits book clubs with his success.
Currently,
Well, I blame book clubs for the proliferation of trade paper,
Okay.
because trade paper and book clubs are a good match.
Sure.
And short books.
And short.
shorter books,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I don't mind the trend toward shorter books.
I don't either. I'm telling you.
I see a
as a
600-page
reviewer-
thing. Is this going to be worth my time?
Yeah. I
But
agree.
if it is, it's one, you don't
Oh,
ever
yeah.
want to get out of it, you
I
know.
know.
That's really
Oh,
true, but
boy,
how
I'm
often
only
does that
halfway.
happen? Not
It's
as
happened
often
a
as you'd
few
like.
times.
A few times, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that harking back to the whole business of the internet and the big change, it seems to me, going around and talking to a lot of bookstore people, that one of the things that you have going and that makes your bookstore successful is you have a rational, well thought out business model, which a lot of bookstores, people start bookstores much in the way you described it, fantasy. Well, I'd really like to have a bookstore. No plan, just I'll buy this bookstore and we'll sit around and we'll sell books to people and talk about books. And then when it doesn't begin to work as well and make enough money, they don't, because they're not business people, they don't know what to do, and so they lose their businesses.
Why don't we let our viewers know where your bookstore is located? It's in Minneapolis.
South Minneapolis, we're on 26th Street, within looking distance of Lindale. Just half a block.
I think we've got a graphic
We
for
do.
this that's up
And
right.
it's that's for right in between. 26 would be about halfway between Franklin and Lake Street.
It's a lovely entrance. You walk
Oh, it's
down
really
into
cool.
the
Yeah, it's very-
Yeah, it reminds
Yeah,
me.
very cozy.
Reminds me of the mystery bookshop, the old mystery bookstore in Manhattan.
In New York.
Before he
yeah,
moved.
right.
Auto
Exactly.
Walk
Penciler
down.
store, old
Auto
store.
Penciler.
Yeah.
Without the spiral, I'd love to have that spiral
Yeah,
staircase. But,
But there must have been a learning curve for you when you first started. And,
well, we were
yeah.
lucky. Pat had worked at the store for several years.
Right.
One day a week. It turned out, or 2 days a week, and it turned out those 2 days were consistently the best sales days when they used to be the worst. And she
Because-
learned a lot.
Because you hand sell books.
Yeah, and Steve Stillwell, who we bought it from, was really great with helping us out and telling us some of the perils and what to make sure not to do, things
Now,
like that.
you started in a direction, Carl, and I'd like to, and I'm hoping I know where you were going with it,
With
with the
big box.
chains and with Amazon and with, how do you succeed? How do you keep your bookstore viable?
Well, for one thing, the first thing on our list of things to do was you guys. We said we are going to favor and showcase local authors because it's just
You do it so
incredible.
well.
Yes, you
It
do.
is so
And
much
we
fun.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh boy, do
And
we.
it's a mutual thing. You know, you guys help us out, like, you know, especially your group here. I mean, you haven't missed one of the Rite of Springs. I think you had to once, but
You just brought that up, and I think you should mention that. What is Rite of Spring?
well, Rite of Spring is an open house where you just throw
Caution
the doors.
to the winds, is
Yeah,
what you're saying.
exactly. I sent out this year for this last one 75 invitations to local authors and mystery authors, and amazingly, 56 responded that they would come. I mean, that's an
And then
incredible
you
percentage.
stagger.
And how many actually showed up?
We were missing 4 because of various
Yeah.
emergencies.
Yeah, I think you told me that, illnesses.
But it was
And-
so fun. I mean,
Yeah.
that